Welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where we define sustainability one concept and bad joke at a time. I'm your host, Nethra.
And I'm your host, Cecilia, and today we have an atypical episode brought to you by the folks at Leafr. We are welcoming Nick Valenzia, the co-founder of Leafr, which is a platform for businesses that are serious about sustainability, but maybe short on time, skills, and capacity, can consult with. They are the world's largest network of independent sustainability specialists and the only place to find rated sustainability tools and resources. They're also currently working on addressing the green or sustainability skills gap. Nathan, could you maybe explain what this is or set the scene for us?
Right. We're going to be talking a lot about the skills gap today and how Leafr is stepping in to address those needs. And here's the reality definers. The clean energy transition and the movement into sustainability is no longer a someday idea. It's happening right now. Governments are pouring billions into scaling EVs, batteries, nuclear, heat pumps, solar, reporting. But there's a catch. We don't have enough people with the right skills to make that rollout happen at the pace that we need. That's what people mean, and that's what we mean when we talk about the green skills gap. It's not just a buzzword. It shows up in very practical ways, right? Not enough engineers to design grid infrastructure, not enough technicians to install heat pumps, not enough operators to safely run advanced nuclear facilities, people who are trained on the right skill sets, and not enough reporting experts to support corporate sustainability needs, or experts in circularity and design. Without the talent pipeline, we risk having the money, the technology, and the political will, but not the people to execute.
It's a struggle for sure. And sustainability has been around literally forever. First embedded in traditional and ancestral practices, then moving into fields like conservation and waste management and so much more. And now more than ever, we are seeing an explosion of niche sustainability fields. The boom of climate tech startups, reporting and disclosure with increasing pressure for corporations to be transparent and disclose their emissions, circular package design, their operations to the whole world. It's transparency.
Right. And with our world becoming more niche and more advanced day by day, there have also bloomed so many more niche areas of expertise, which I think is pretty exciting.
Super exciting, Nathan.
I'm honestly loving seeing fields like the sustainable movie production pop up.
That was awesome.
I enjoyed hearing about that in our last episode with the folks from the Climate Film Festival. I recently discovered the Music Sustainability Alliance that engages artists, venues, production vendors, agents, record labels. I mean, it makes me pretty happy to see people filling these gaps. But at the same time, I'm like, what skills gap? Because I know how hard it was for you and I to find jobs. So I'm like, this makes me feel...
The struggle was insane.
Right. And this makes me feel like, is there a green skills gap? Because right now, with things going on in the administration and the job market, it feels like there's an oversaturation of people looking for work in this field and not able to find it. So I'm curious to really, explore that. And yeah, I'm confused. Where are the gaps, Cecilia?
Nathan, this is such a good question. And I was asking myself this as well in my, job search. I was like, hello, I'm here. I could fill the gap maybe. I don't know. But Nathan, to help us explore all of this, we are joined by Nick, whose work at Leafr puts him right at the center of this entire conversation. Nick's been thinking deeply about what the green skills gap actually looks like in practice, how it's affecting industries across the board, and where AI lies in this, and where the current political landscape and other factors might also play a role in shaping the workforce of tomorrow. We'll start by getting to know Nick, what drew him into this space, what piqued his curiosity about the skills gap, then we'll dig into what the gap really means, how it's showing up across industries, and whether the skills gap narrative is overblown or it's a real barrier to climate progress. From there, I kind of want to pick his brain about what AI means in this space, where it can genuinely help, where it might hurt, and how we can prepare for both. Because my mom keeps freaking out about how AI is coming for everyone's job. And I was like, Mom, I know, I feel you. I'm right there with you trying to find a job, but I'm hoping Nick can provide some comfort for us here. So let's jump right in.
Let's jump right in. Nick, welcome to Sustainability Defined.
Thank you for having me on. That's a great intro, and I think one of my new goals for this appearance is to maybe reassure your mum a bit that the future's not going to be as bleak as she might fear.
Good,
Thank you,
good.
Nick.
She's having some freakouts, as am I, though, you know? It's not just her.
Right. Cecilia and I have had the pleasure of getting to know you a bit behind the scenes of this episode, and you really do have a fascinating background. I mean, you grew up in Malta, the beautiful island between Sicily and North Africa, which makes you Maltese. And I remember you telling us that the dog breed is, in fact, not from Malta.
Right.
So, how
Yes.
did growing up in an island nation such as Malta influence you to work in sustainability and eventually start Leafr?
So I spent a huge amount of my childhood there. We actually moved countries every 2 years because my dad went to the UK and joined the British Army. So I actually grew up between Germany, Oman, the States, the UK, and Malta. But
Oh,
Malta's
wow.
always been my kind of like, the center of who I am. My whole family, my enormous, very stereotypically enormous Mediterranean family still live there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that's my kind of the long form answer I have for how I got into this space is I grew up and my house is kind of 100 meters from the sea. There's reefs nearby, with fish, and the whole community is set up around fishing in the sea. And over the 30 years of my life, I've seen those reefs and that marine landscape slowly die.
That's so sad.
Yeah, and it sticks in you pretty deep when you see something like that. So I think it kind of got me interested in these issues, but also as someone that I would say I probably have a higher level of knowledge than just your average person on the street about these things. But I don't think I would know how to solve an issue like that because it's so intractable. It's such a wicked problem, and that's probably the seed of like how can we proceed in this environment where expertise is really hard to come by about all of these complex issues.
What do you think about the narrative of the skills gap? Is this overstated, and how is it showing up across industries?
I think there's a difference between a talent surplus and a skills gap. There's a lot of people looking for work on the market right now. That doesn't necessarily translate to every role that we put out there having candidates with enough expertise to do it. And I think that's the really clear distinction that I would make there is the definition of the green skills gap is any skills that are related to kind of improving environmental outcomes for businesses or for society. So it's things like measuring emissions, you mentioned installing heat pumps or solar panels, nuclear energy engineers. There's also indirect skills, so it's soft skills, the ability to communicate or to work with people that go across industry, but we would need them also on sustainability projects. I think the market's really flooded there, for sure. A lot of people are looking, and yet you get this kind of funny paradox where
Tell me about it.
yeah, right, well, but businesses have got hundreds of applications to each role, and yet the really critical roles that they need to do, like measuring their emissions, it becomes very difficult to find someone who knows how to measure emissions for, let's say, a steel making plant. And I think that just boils down to the fact that we haven't really tried to do that in the past, so we don't have that kind of base of kind of expertise. And then I think, I don't know, your introduction headed off my answer here, because I think the way it plays out is things like, it boils down to, I think, the fact that we cannot make the things that we need to make in order to deliver on the energy transition. Like heat pump installations, solar panels, nuclear power stations. We're doing all of that stuff far more slowly than we ideally need to, because we don't have anyone who knows how to do those things, right? It's really difficult to find someone who, I saw a stat the other day in the UK, Octopus Energy, for example, they need 4,000 heat pump installers by 2030. They're on less than 100 right now. And
That's shocking.
another one is, so you mentioned batteries, Northvolt. I don't know, were you guys following the Northvolt story?
I don't think so, but yeah, please.
It's just I just think it's emblematic. It's this huge European lithium-ion battery manufacturer. It was like the great hope of European battery manufacturing. Raised 13 billion in funding, so they were not small. And they failed recently. And it's so crazy to me. It's it wasn't for a lack of demand, and fundamentally I think the reason why most businesses fail is a lack of demand for what they're selling. It was for a lack of supply. So they couldn't make enough batteries to meet demand. They failed on their contracts. And then the kind of like the post-mortem, it was they could not find enough skilled people to do this. And I think it's just completely emblematic of the kind of problems that we're facing of, if you don't do this, we won't be able to make the right stuff. And then on the kind of white collar side, it's like you said, we're not going to be able to report correctly. We're not going to be able to manage or deliver these projects. And I think it's just as simple as that. It raises costs and it increases timeframes.
It's so interesting to hear this because I feel like heat pump manufacturing, like all of these niche specialties, like these are not options that I was even taught to know to enter into in school. Even sustainability on its own, like there were still master's programs, and like my university just rolled out its sustainability certificate program like only a couple years before I graduated.
Go Georgia.
So, go dogs. But still, right? Like it's like we are waiting for universities and governments and schools to catch up to this demand too, because we as people entering the workforce don't know some of these things are in demand.
Yeah. There needs to be a lot more kind of matching up, I think, between like job and skills demand and universities. But I think there's always a kind of delta there.
They're trying. I mean, the master's program that I just graduated from, we were only the third cohort, and it was brand new, and now they're rolling out even more master's programs in sustainability as well. So gives me hope.
Yeah, it is something to be hopeful about. But again, some of these niches that need to be filled, because like these master's programs aren't necessarily training people to install solar solar panels, right? So it's like
Nethra, I would have zero clue about where to get started.
Exactly.
Like
a lot of them are tailored to more white collar jobs, which is great in itself, but there's definitely like a big lack here that we're talking about. So Nick, my question for you is, what role do governments and universities and like the private sector play in equipping the workforce to be ready for this?
Well, I think on the government level, and this has been in my mind a bit recently, there's like, in the UK, I speak for, there's this kind of like slightly toxic debate around immigration. Like our population is Asian and we desperately need skilled workers. And so I think encouraging and just kind of forecasting better on the kinds of workers we need, and then doing the, public-private partnerships, for example. Like I saw one example that made my blood boil recently, were like Hitachi, right? So Korean company were trying to build a nuclear power plant in Wales. And the local, they weren't giving local planning permission. And one of the reasons was because it might affect the local language. And I just thought, that's thousands of well-paying, multi-generational jobs for local people. And I don't know, but I think that's a pretty good way to protect the local community and protect local languages, by give everyone a job for 30 years, right?
Definitely.
I think that's like maybe emblematic of the government side of the debate. And then privately, I mean, I think there could always be more communication between universities and private companies of, what do we need? I do think the delta that we've been talking about exists because it takes years to design courses and to bring in practitioners, and the fact that they're practitioners means they're not always available to go and teach. And so I think there's always a bit of catch up to be played. And then I think the other thing is like, I think you need to just kind of get out there and do the work in order to get the right experience. Like education is fantastic, but it only goes so far. But I think those channels of communication are really important between businesses and unis.
Yeah, I had a friend, Chris, if you're listening, he was telling me, he was like,
Hey Chris,
Shout out, Chris.
I don't know you.
He was like, I'm on the job search. Like, I'm going to start looking into solar panel installation, because that's like where that's where the money is. Like, that's where the time is. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, I didn't think about it that way, because I'm so sometimes in my bubble of like, okay, I need to get my reporting job, I need to get my sustainability analyst job, which is equally as important. But right, there's so many gaps that are present in this wicked problem that we talked about. Curious, Nick, where does Leafr fit into this?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned this at the start. Leafr right now we're the world's largest marketplace for sustainability experts and consultants, and of all shapes and sizes, whether it's kind of like carbon accounting, biodiversity. And we were set up to help businesses who lack skills or have kind of small sustainability teams work with the right expert to get any project done, and to do that within a couple of clicks versus kind of weeks, or the high costs that you face with working with consultancies. And then over time, we start using our data to do things like, well, I'm looking for a carbon accounting tool. We can recommend you that as well. We use AI to get kind of questions you have answered. And I think that the mission that we have is get businesses the expertise they need on demand at a fraction of the cost. And our big theory here is, I think one way to kind of reduce the skills gap, which is fundamentally a mismatch between supply and demand, you need to increase supply somehow, right? And the one way that you can do that is just increase the utilization of current supply. So instead of having someone working in one company for their whole career for 5 years and their skills are not spread across, I think skills need to be more evenly distributed, and having that person actually plug into companies when they're needed, perform LTAs across 10, 20 companies over the course of a year instead of one, means that we can be a lot more dynamic about meeting skills gaps. And that's really the kind of the philosophy driving Leafr.
Right. And you're kind of converting the everyday sustainable professional into a consultant where they can plug and play into multiple different projects.
Yeah, and we try and build the infrastructure for them to be able to do that. We kind of handle contracting and admin, the kind of hygiene stuff, making sure they get paid on time, giving them a community, matching them up with learning opportunities, and the sorts of things that I think you can start to do once you have much more leverage as a network of consultants rather than an individual, where maybe you're not going to be able to do things like negotiate discounts with learning providers, or even unfortunately get paid on time for many people.
I'm curious to know if people are interested in filling this gap. Maybe they've worked as consultants before, maybe they just graduated, maybe they've never worked in sustainability. Where should they look to? Where do you think the high demand for this lies?
I think it's the short-term and long-term view. Short-term, we're seeing a lot of demand in areas like biodiversity. And I think that's just new regulations. There's one in the UK called Biodiversity Net Gain. A lot of companies now need to measure their impact on nature, which is great. I love it. I think
that is amazing.
Yeah, let's do more of that.
That is such a win.
And it's driving a lot of demand for ecologists, for example. Other ones, I think, perennially just measuring emissions, and especially measuring them around kind of scope 3 through your supply chain.
Yeah, the outsourcing, I think, is what can really get some companies to, I don't know what they do there.
Yeah, it's really tricky. It's really tricky. And you kind of peek under the carpet, and it's just this net. We were talking about restaurants before we started recording, and to do that for one restaurant is an insanely difficult job. So I think those in the short term. Long term, it's hard to tell, but I would say we've been talking about kind of the world of atoms versus the world of bits, like solar panel installations and nuclear and heat pumps and all of that. I would say whether you want to work as a frontline engineer, fantastic, or whether you want to, we will always need people to manage those kinds of projects. So if you want to work more on the kind of management side, we've got so much to do in terms of the installation of renewables, in terms of the balancing of energy grids, just the whole energy transition. And I think there will always be work in there if you want it.
Definitely. I mean, coming from Houston, it's a very big energy city, so I can imagine how that is very high demand.
You guys, it's a lot of solar, right?
Very, yes, a lot of solar.
It's a good point about needing to have folks in the management space and understanding how to bring all these moving parts together. I'm curious, if I was a professional looking to register on Leafr, how would that process work?
So there are 4 stages, and we're very selective. As a result, there is a long waiting list to join Leafr. I wish it weren't the case. I kind of hate the waiting list because I don't want anyone sitting on there, waiting to hear back. But we've got to balance supply and demand, and we've also we take our vetting pretty seriously. So it's a written application, interviews about your background, not only your sustainability expertise, but also behavioral and kind of competency as well around just the standard things that you would need in a day-to-day job. And then once you've gone through to that, you can also have referrals as well. We look at kind of testimonials that you can put on. Then your first project is invariably a trial project. So we see how it goes with the client. If it goes well, great, you're on fully. And if not, we can either coach you a bit or we can find something else. So it takes a while. And because of that, I think we've definitely seen companies get burnt in the past by working with someone who's maybe kind of said they had skills where they didn't. And we really want to avoid that.
That's fair. Take as many precautions as you can.
Absolutely. And we touched about this in the beginning of the episode. You're doing a lot of great vetting, and you've mentioned that you have a big pool of professionals. And when it comes to professionals that are just like in the job force currently, and they're feeling like everything's against them, you're having people manipulate resumes with AI to incorporate all of the keywords and all of these things, and even sometimes replace certain, roles that are more soft skills oriented. In your view, is AI more likely to close the green skills gap or widen it?
It's really difficult to say the effect of AI on the green skills gap. I think in the kind of my take here is I think it's more likely to help with the green skills gap, because I think a lot of people just simply didn't have a place to go to check things like, are we affected by X regulation or Y certification? But I think it's driving this different trend, which is maybe relevant, which is you're seeing smaller sustainability teams. And so you're having, one team member who's using AI and kind of being a lot more productive and then potentially bringing in specialists where they need them. I think the nature of the game, and you mentioned this at the start, there's so many different skills in sustainability and so many different areas are always cropping up. No one was talking about biodiversity 5 years ago, for example, or very few people were. And I think that will just continue to happen. I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So it's hard to say, but I hope, as with all new technologies and all new ways that we organize information, it will have a positive effect. That's my kind of optimist view.
I'm glad to see that take.
Yeah, AI is such a tricky subject matter to talk about when you talk about sustainability and using AI in sustainable operations and stuff like that. So I don't know, I'm wondering what soft skills, like you mentioned communication is really important before, and systems thinking, project management, stuff like that. What do you think the skills that will matter the most in the AI-driven future will be?
Well, the other one is so what skills are kind of, or seem to be maybe on a more downwards trend? I think one that we've seen a bit of recently is just critical thinking. The ability to form concepts and ideas is
Oh, that makes me laugh a little, but it shouldn't make me laugh.
It's tricky, right? It's you've kind of got this set of cheat codes when you're going through an education system now with AI.
Talk about this all the time with my friends.
Same.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this really, but I feel like I wouldn't be able to have done my master's without AI.
Yeah. And I'm a hypocrite because I also use it in my day-to-day, and I think I try not to use it in areas where it requires me to kind of think independently. But it's just so easy. But I think there's a payoff there that will only become apparent further down the line, which is I'm going to date myself here, but I did all of my exams by writing with a pen and paper. We sat down an exam hall and used a pen and paper. And now I really appreciate having done that, because you get to think about the kind of concept and you have to almost force it out from your brain through your arm, through the pen onto the page.
Critical thinking. I don't even think you dated yourself with that, because I have taken college exams with pen and paper.
Right. You get the kind of the bump on your finger from doing it for too long. But I think that stuff is really important, right? It's you don't want to head that off. So I think that one for sure. Communication skills is funny. It's people, I wonder if I'm getting worse at writing emails now because I use it as a bit of a crutch and I'm trying not to.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially with emails now, you can tell that it's been written with AI because they're so friendly but fake.
Yeah.
I don't know.
The dreaded M
very
dash.
silly.
Yeah, the M dash. I know. I I've been thinking about that too in my own career. Also, just using AI and its own environmental impacts, and then being a sustainability professional trying to avoid that. So
It's so contradicting.
it is, and I try to be very selective with how I use it. Like I'll use it to optimize something that, like if I have like a lot of pages of something and I need to summarize it, sure, I'll use it for that. But I like you said, I don't try to have it replace critical thinking, because I think the pendulum will swing back around when everyone's voices start to kind of sound similar, and people will actually start valuing in the next year or two just unique, I don't know, non AI generated content. Because
Totally.
it is obvious to me, at least. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think like when you mentioned a little bit about how AI might shift the roles of people on sustainability teams. I'm curious how you imagine the composition of a sustainability team 5 to 10 years from now. I mean, right now, sustainability teams are pretty siloed to being like a pocket of folks within a larger corporation. Do you see it staying the same? Do you see them spreading out and sort of integrating into all different departments?
I think we're kind of seeing this trend that we saw a bit of last year, and that I think massive. They're like it's showing up massively in the data this year is that kind of issue of, or that image of the sustainability team of one. So you have one person within a big company, sometimes within massive companies, and it's this new model of delivery where they're kind of setting strategy. They're using AI to be more productive, and then they're pulling in specialists when they need them. And it's the kind of I think there's pros and cons. The pros is obviously the ability to move much faster. We're in a really budget and resource constrained environment for sustainability. Like we have to kind of name the beast. I think it's really difficult for teams at the moment. Budgets being cut left, right, and centre, but targets aren't going anywhere. And within that environment, actually the ability to have maybe a lower headcount, a lower kind of full-time headcount, and just parachute in, let's say, a biodiversity expert or an LTA expert when you need them is really powerful. Because, we can't expect that one person, that small team, to know about like carbon credits, biodiversity, carbon emissions, and also be able to communicate to the C-suite. So you can do a lot more, a lot quickly. And we'll be releasing a report on this in a couple of weeks, but we've massively seen that trend come through, and we're seeing some huge companies or groups of companies that are kind of demonstrating this model. So I think it's cool. I think it's a really interesting new one. I think it means you can do a lot more with a lot less, and frankly, we have a lot less to work with at the moment. So it's driven a lot of work for us. So we obviously feel positive about it.
And that's interesting because sustainability professionals historically are expected to wear many, many different hats, from being like a budgeting expert to, like you said, a reporting expert to suddenly a circularity expert. But it's nice to know that there's platforms like Leafr out there where they can tap into other talent that's, carefully vetted and then use it to support their team. But ultimately, in my eyes, I'm like, I want to see some of that talent off of Leafr be hired full time. Like I want to see bigger departments for companies, because I think that's the ultimate solution in the long run.
I think it has happened a lot. We've got a few people on Leafr who are hired full time, and we would like to as well. I just think that we need to face reality that sustainability teams are at such an inflection point with budgets and with the economy and the shape that it is, that at least at this point now, we're going to need to see, well, we're seeing small teams. I think there's a huge question of like culture change that they need to make within companies, of training that needs to happen to embed this stuff within the rest of the company. If you're a head of procurement, I think there's very few excuses to not be trained on things like scope 3 emissions, because fundamentally they sit within procurement, right? But I think, it's just, I don't know, I think at least in the short term anyway, I think we're also just seeing a lot more of that model of team taking place elsewhere as well. And I think, I don't know how much AI is driving it versus the economy, but it's happening pretty clearly.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what you said about like right now where we sit with budget constraints and things like that, we have to get creative in how we're executing and still meeting the goals. So I'm glad Leafr is filling that niche and that need.
Super cool. And now we're going to do our rapid fire question round. The definers, our listeners, love this. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions and you just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
No explanation necessary.
Yeah. Don't even think about it too much.
Yes, just answer away. Okay, question number 1. Most fascinating sector within sustainability you wish you could explore more?
Biodiversity in nature.
Number 2, bigger barrier to climate solution, which is it? Technology or people?
It has to be people. I would say that, wouldn't I?
That is what this episode is about, basically.
The IPCC does say that we do have the technologies already to solve climate change. I will say.
Really?
Yeah, I'll put that on record.
When did they put that out?
Oh, in one of the recent reports, they're all here. But again, I would say that, right?
That's cool. I mean, that's kind of hopeful
We have
as
a
well.
whole book on it too, Project Drawdown. But yeah, you're right. We just
Yeah,
need to
there we go.
execute.
Big inspiration, yeah.
There you go. All right, question number 3. Sustainability teams of the future, bigger or smaller than today?
Smaller, based on what we've just said. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. And then final question number 4. One green job you wish existed but doesn't yet?
Can I say one that like I've seen in a couple of videos, but I don't think is that widespread? Is just like a coral reef reseeder. Like that doesn't seem to be happening on any kind of scale, and they seem to be they're under so much pressure. So more of that.
We need all of the diver community to get together and get trained on this. Stats.
Start taking pictures. That'd be cool. The diver community just coming together as one. That'd be super cool. Mine, this is just an intrusive thought, but when I was younger, I was always like, why is there no sustainable police? Like, why is there no one going around the street being like, you can't throw that there, like, pick it up? Or you know what I mean?
You should move to Singapore. That's what they do. You
Is that what they have?
Yeah,
Okay.
you chuck your chewing gum, you get fined.
Okay, well, it exists then.
Whenever I go to India back home to visit family, I have this thought. I'm like, that's like me. I am the sustainable police, but no one seems to, no one seems to care. Well, and Nick, we have just a few more questions for you before we wrap up the episode.
Go ahead. I'm feeling like I haven't reassured maybe Celia, your mother enough on the AI question, and I'm happy to do that because I am more of an optimist with that stuff.
I mean, please, like, give us a little spiel or something about why you're optimistic about the AI revolution, I guess.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was thinking about this, like coming into this call. So I have a history degree originally. One of my degrees is a history one, the first one that I did, and I think history is very instructive in these kinds of things because if you look over the course of history, we've made kind of large technological advancements. Like I'll use an example, like in Spain 100 years ago, or most of the world even 100 years ago, most people worked in agriculture. And now, because of new technologies, like tractors and kind of combine harvesters, we are probably 1 or 2 orders of magnitude more efficient than the Spanish economy was back then. And yet the unemployment rate has gone down, not up. And you would expect it to go up. And I think AI is another example of one of those technologies. I mean, have you heard the kind of like the ATMs and bank tellers example?
I have, yeah, but please explain it to the listeners.
So I mean, in the kind of 60s and 70s, many banks had kind of bank tellers dealing with customer queries and kind of handling cash. And then they brought in ATMs. Is ATMs the word in the States, by the way? I want to make sure that... Okay, so they brought in ATMs and you would expect the number of bank tellers to go down. And it did per branch, but it didn't in total. Because I think, and this is the thing, I think Jevons paradox really applies to the labor force as a resource as much as it does to any other kind of resource. You make something more efficient, you will use more of that thing and you will need more of that thing. So again, banks, instead of saving money and just laying people off by bringing in ATMs, they would just open new branches. And so while the number of tellers per branch went down, the total went up. And I think AI is another example of this, where it's probably going to make the economy more efficient. And yet, for me, an efficient economy is a good economy. And I think that means that we will have far more need for skills and for labor in roles that we don't even know exist yet. Like in Spain 100 years ago, no one knew what a digital marketer would be, and now there's loads of them. And I think it's... So I'm a lot less kind of pessimistic than most. And the final thing I'd say is just like the job market is tough right now. I think it's really tough. I put a lot of that down to the economy. There's been a lot of studies that have come out just looking for evidence of AI impacts on job prospects and job placements, and the data are not there. We can't see any data that is affecting. I think graduates have a really tricky time at the moment, but I've yet to see.
I did.
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm exhibit A and B here, but I'm yet to see good data that it is affecting the workforce. So like, I think we'll be all right, and I hope you can pass this on to your to your mom. Yeah,
We'll be listening.
I'm not gonna lie, like this optimistic analogy of the bank teller kind of made me a little bit more scared, because I'm just thinking, if you're opening up more ATMs, if you were to do the same with these data centers, like there's just so much resources that go into running and up the maintenance of a data center, and I think that's what scares me about AI as well.
yeah.
But
I
that's a
so
side note.
I mean, no, I think it's like, can't talk about AI without talking about the energy use, especially within sustainability as well.
Yeah, and the water.
I do think that a lot of people within sustainability, and I don't know if you saw like Hannah Ritchie's work on this, like on just the footprint of AI, and I think a lot of people, if they care about this, need to look at the other activities that they're doing. So, 10 minutes of scrolling through social media is kind of many hundreds of queries. And
Whoa.
yeah, and it's
Oh my. I
yeah,
need to get a new bedtime activity.
and so I think, but then the other thing is like, what I really hope here is, and it looks like it might be going that way, they've just announced a deal for 10 new nuclear SMRs in the UK, is the massive data demands of data centers, the massive energy demands of data centers will, necessity being the mother invention, drive a lot more investment in stable sources of clean energy like nuclear. And that's my great hope. And talking kind of 10, 15 years, I hope that future's come to pass, and it looks like we're getting there. But I agree, like I think it's worrying, and you've got to be really cognizant of what we're using the stuff for and whether it's really needed or whether there's another way that we can kind of solve our problem.
Right, but I mean, you brought up a great point, and that honestly made me feel optimistic about what I was just feeling pessimistic about. So thank you for that.
No worries.
Yeah. I think that what you bring up is a good point, and I think I find hope in knowing that like things do balance out. Like homeostasis is a thing. So I feel like what you're talking about is an example of that too. I think that people can use AI to enhance things, and I've also been thinking about how I can cut out unnecessary environmental impacts that I have within that. So thanks for that. And just to bring us back to this topic about the green skills gap.
Yes, please bring us back, Nethra.
We're going on an AI rabbit hole here, but Nick, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We had a couple more questions for you, and one being, like, to people listening to the podcast, to executives and maybe people on the opposite side of that demand who are hiring, what's the most practical steps that they can take to future-proof their workforce?
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say come and see us at Leafr. But
Right.
What I would say is, I think, so training only goes so far, especially if you're concentrating training on one person. I think what's more important is giving everyone else within the organization a bit of a base of language and kind of understanding around these issues. And I think that what you do there is essentially is, why do you train? I think you do it to create a culture around sustainability, if that is your goal. And so I would say that's really important, is just like a shared language around these issues. And then the other thing that I think is a frequent complaint that we get on Leafr from heads of sustainability is them not being empowered by the C-suite, whether it's financially, whether it's through their team, whether it's through their kind of their remit or their mandate. And I'd say I don't think there's any point in having a head of sustainability unless you're really empowering them to make these decisions, and you're really kind of like visibly presenting them as someone who's got a clear scope of work. So I would say that, and I think, to be honest, the model that we talked about a bit of kind of smaller team pulling in specialists, for a lot of companies that we work with, it's really interesting because it means that you save costs as well, and you pull in people when you're needed while the economy is in the state that it is, and you don't stop velocity, because I think fundamentally what's going to catch people out is missing targets, getting fined for greenwashing, having consumer blowback because of they're not keeping up to their kind of pledges that they've made. And I think that's really important. And fundamentally, more than team size, more than kind of, how many people have you got working on something? What matters is the outcome, right? What matters is how well it goes. And so it's whatever model gets us there better and faster.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And you bring up climate pledges, climate goals. What gives you hope that the green skills gap can be closed in time to meet these really demanding goals?
I think like humans are very good at working things out over time. Like
I would hope so.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm very long kind of human ingenuity. Like we try out all of the bad ideas and we're only left with the good ones. And like I kind of mentioned this before, but I do think that the pathways are clear, and we know this. We know how to get there. Everything else is just expertise and platitudes fundamentally. And so, and I think we're lucky that we live in an age where actually it's got a lot easier to share expertise, and it's got a lot easier not only through like, again, the kind of structures like the one we're talking about, but just through like the sharing of information.
This podcast.
This podcast is a good example of just, you can share ideas and share learnings a lot more easily today even than kind of 10, 15 years ago. So I think that gives me a lot of hope. I'm probably, as you can probably hear, like I'm more optimistic than many in the space, because I can't be pessimistic, otherwise I will just sink.
You can't. You get really depressed. Like climate grief, climate depression is a thing.
Yeah.
Eco anxiety, I have that hardcore.
Right. Yeah. It will take time, and again, I have to believe this, otherwise there's no point in doing what I do. But I think we will figure it out by hook or by crook, and we'll get there.
Right. We talked about this on the last
said.
episode, but it's the job of a sustainability professional, or just anyone who's passionate about sustainability, to stay equally parts skeptical and equally parts hopeful. So I always want to keep that balance.
Yeah. For sure. No, I couldn't agree. And, if you work in sustainability, unless you are one of those kind of heat pump installers, I think most people working in sustainability are not the ones actually doing the work. They're asking other people to kind of give them the data or install this or do the work for them. And so you've got to be a kind of evangelizer. And I think what motivates people is this kind of, you sell them a positive vision of the future and of what will happen. Which I think is always like, it's a lot more powerful to do that, because that's also what businesses kind of live and die by, right?
We're all marketers at heart.
And before we close out, could you tell the listeners where they can find you at Leafr, maybe social media, website, whatever it may be?
Yeah, so Leafr is leafr.com, and then love chatting with people on LinkedIn. So it's Nick Valenzia, it's Valenzia. Reach out and say hi, or drop us a note. I think there's a company email on the website.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I feel like there's takeaways on staying hopeful around AI's role in the green skills gap, understanding that there's so much more to sustainability. There's so many niches out there to explore, and thinking about how sustainability teams will mend and mold in the future. So appreciate you being here. And I know you did have a special offer for our listeners.
Yeah, so I think if you are working in a sustainability team, or you're part of a business that is kind of grappling with any of these things, whether you've got an expertise gap or whether you've got projects on your horizon, we've dealt with hundreds of them. So I'd like to think that we're okay at kind of talking through these issues. So Leaf is offering free expert strategy consultations with businesses. So if you want to, we will leave a Calendly link in the kind of body of this podcast, wherever you find it. Feel free to book time there. And we've supported, like I said, many, many businesses with these issues. We're happy to have a free kind of intro call.
That is amazing. And definers, you heard it here. Look out for that Calendly link. Visit Leafr at leafr.com. And if you're interested, maybe hit up Nick on LinkedIn and learn more about the awesome work that he's doing. But thank you for joining us on this podcast. This was a great conversation, and I hope you definers enjoyed it.
Thank you both so much.